Kia ora and good afternoon, folks. I am here to talk about selling more games. No, that didn't work. There we go. Well, not exactly. I'm actually here to talk about the importance of making sure that everyone can play your games. But that in turn hopefully means that you can sell more games. As I was so wonderfully introduced, you now know who I am, but I'll say it again for the people in the back. My name is Humphrey Hanley, though many people in the world know me as No Hands, No Excuses, or simply No Hands NZ, because as you can see, I actually don't have hands. I was born with a condition known as epidermolysis bullosa. I wrote it up there for you because I don't expect you to remember that. Basically, it means I'm missing a collagen fiber in my skin and it's just not attached properly. This causes damage and injuries on a daily basis, and also then scarring and webbing of my hands that's covered all my fingers over. We're not really here talking about that today, though. What we're here to talk about is the cool thing that I get to play video games for the entertainment of the masses. I once said I play video games for a living, but if that were true, I'd have to be living out of a cardboard box on the street somewhere. It is true that I have a childhood dream job of actually playing video games. I'm a Twitch partner, and I've been streaming video games seriously since early 2018, so almost 18 months now. It's very hard to put a label on what exactly it is I do on Twitch, so I came up with my own. I'm a motivational streamer. I don't play to be the best at a game. I simply play to show the world that if a guy with useless, fragile skin and no hands can do what I do, then what's holding them back from giving life a go? As you can see, my lack of hands presents many challenges in life, water jugs, etc. One of which is how to play games that traditionally seem to require you to have 12 fingers and 3 thumbs. I've seen the standard controller mapping that you guys put in games. Seriously, rumor has it you people only have 10 digits, right? Let me wind it back a little bit. A few years ago, I had major surgery, and during my recovery, I decided to start a vlog for YouTube, the introduction to which you just saw there. And basically it was, even though I'd been through this mess, I was getting back on my feet, hitting the gym, and I wanted to show the world that I literally had no hands, but also no excuses. I was going to make sure there was one thing in every day worth being awake for. At that stage, I was also working in the corporate rat race, doing corporate communications for a really large national company, but they made me redundant, so suddenly I had a whole lot of free time. This dream of being a motivational content creator for a living instead is what I started doing. I branched out into offering my skills and services as a videographer and photographer. I've seen many of you about some of the Games Fest events this week as a photographer. I'm sure the people in purple shirts are well sick of me by now. I'm also a licensed drone operator, and amongst other things, to pay the bills and the rent, I go around giving speeches all over the world about making the most of life and not letting this disability hold me back. It's led to some incredible opportunities, including getting to help Microsoft talk about this amazing XAC here in New Zealand, the Xbox Adaptive Controller for people with disabilities. I went to TwitchCon in San Jose last October sorry, I was trying to see what my next slide is. I went to TwitchCon in San Jose last October to join an amazing panel of disabled gamers talking about our various experiences and issues with accessibility in gaming and streaming. And now I'm here in a room full of the most amazing people in gaming that our region has to offer. You guys. Yeah. Awesome place to be, and a pretty awesome crowd to get to talk to about video games. Honestly, I have been playing video games since forever. All of that time, it's been strongly tied to living my best life, despite often very poor health. I still remember having a little ASCII tank around a green-black maze on my grandfather's computer in the 80s. And then my first serious personal games machine was the Amiga 500. Hands up if you've owned one of those. Yes. Sorry to out you. It was donated to me by a local Lions club because I was actually too sick to go outside and play with the other kids in the park. I was a goddamn ace pilot in Hybris, though. Then eventually, along came the internet. It changed my life. No longer was I alone playing games in my room. I had access to the outside world. Sure, it was possibly faster to run down the road and send someone a letter than leave messages on the local BBS, but when writing and running are not an option, that connection to the outside world was incredible. We got better internet. Yay, 56K dial-up. And then IRC chat was a thing, and suddenly I was part of a community of people. And what was amazing is that I was suddenly in a community as Humphrey, as a normal human being, not the kid in the corner with the disability that you shouldn't really touch or talk to. The internet, and subsequently gaming, provided a space where I could be free to be judged, just like everybody else, for the first time in my life. And to be honest, you'll never really understand how powerful that was. But it was all thanks to people like you who wanted to change the way we interact and make the most of technology. Fast forward, I'm not going to say how many years. In gamer years, I'm apparently ancient, according to the quiz we had the other night. But fast forward to February of this year, and the Super Bowl. Someone mentioned that earlier, you know, the most watched, hyped, and expensive marketing exercise in all of sports ball. And the world finally got a glimpse at how important the world of video gaming can be for people with disabilities. When Microsoft unveiled the official commercial for the XAC during one of the most expensive commercial breaks in broadcasting. Did you see it? If you didn't, don't worry, we have it.
My name is Grover.
Sean. My name is Ian.
I'm Taylor. My name is Owen, and I am 9.5 years old.
I only have one.
And yeah.
I love video games, my friends, my family, and again, video games.
Whenever I play it, it makes me feel happy.
The fun that you get to have with connecting with your friends.
You make your own rules?
It's his way of interacting with his friends when he can't physically otherwise do it.
When I'm playing with a regular controller, there's some things that don't work for me.
It's difficult for me to use both joysticks and the D-pad at the exact same time.
And it just slowed me down a bunch more while other people were like,
She's never had the freedom to play at the level she knows she could.
I had never thought it was unfair. I just thought, hey, this is the way it is and it's not gonna change.
What I like about the adaptive controller is that now everyone can play.
I don't even have to look at the controller and just be like looking at the screen like, hey, yep.
You never want your kid to feel like an outsider or an other.
One of the biggest fears early on is, how will Owen be viewed by the other kids?
He's not different when he plays.
It's a little challenging, but that's the whole point of gaming.
I can hit the buttons just as fast as they can.
And I think I can crush my friends.
No matter how your body is or how fast you are, you can play. It's a really good thing to have in this world.
Yeah, okay, shut up. I'm not crying, you're crying. Because of this commercial, for the first time I can ever remember, people were talking about two things I've never heard some of them mention, let alone in the same tweet. Video games and disability. Sure, the singer. T-Pain, the rapper, the American Surgeon General, athletes, stars. Within hours of that commercial, I was seeing more people tweet about this than I saw tweeting about that ninja guy appearing for 5 seconds in the main Super Bowl commercial, advertising the football. People like me were seen and put up on the main stage thanks to that minute-and-a-half beauty. And the message was clear. Make it so everyone can play games. Microsoft have done something amazing by creating this commercial. Product that makes access to controlling video games that much simpler for people like me that need it. But more than that, they've brought the conversation about accessibility into the spotlight. Honestly, that's a bigger knock-on effect than I even think that they'd imagined it having. Since that commercial, I've seen some of the bigger name studios like EA, Blizzard, Ubisoft, and Sony, all of them talking about design aspects specifically related to accessibility. Game devs on games like Apex and PUBG, games I play a lot on stream, have reached out to help me solve accessibility issues or talk about inclusive disability representation in their games. Honestly, all huge steps forward in creating accessible games. The thing is, when we talk about making games accessible, what we're really talking about is the core of the conversation, making it possible for as many people as possible to play your games. Now, that doesn't sound like a bad thing to anyone, does it? Because the more people that can access your game, obviously the more people that will buy it. There's a lot to try and capture here, but when we start looking at the amazingly different ways that games need to be accessible, and by the way, there's no single game that does all the ideal accessibility features perfectly. Most recently, Spider-Man has been hailed as having amazingly inclusive accessibility options. The only problem for me is it's on PS4, and that's not really a very accessible platform, as there are no real alternatives to the PS4 controller yet. So nothing is perfect. It's important to note, though, that just because the XAC makes the Xbox more accessible, even Microsoft has openly stated that it is not a substitute for game design, including accessibility features like controller remapping in the game, rather than at a system level on the actual Xbox. One of the biggest issues I personally have with accessing video games is the controller layout. Being able to load up your game, the first thing I do is, and usually live, with lots of people watching, is go in and change the controls to my personalized but quite ridiculous layout, custom calculated over the decades to put as many buttons as possible within range of my knuckled fists as I roll it over the keyboard, but then also placing them far enough apart that I don't accidentally end up jumping, reloading, dropping all my ammunition, and a grenade at my feet. Yes, that has happened. Don't ask me how it turned out. If there are critical controls that can't be altered or haven't been included in the menu options for remapping, sometimes I can't play your game at all. Sometimes I can remap enough buttons to start playing a game, and then a little further down, well, not too far down, you find some functions that are just off limits because the game hasn't included an option to change, like, scrolling on the map to a button rather than the mouse wheel. Seriously, please make it possible to change every single user function in your games. Even if you don't think there's any reason why people would use something other than the default, trust me. Us disabled people, yeah, we use things other than the default all the time, and sometimes it's the only way we can make a game recognize the input from our weird custom controllers. Have any of you seen someone with a high-level spinal injury play a video game with a quad stick? They are literally playing by moving a joystick with their mouse while blowing and sucking into tubes that trigger command functions. It's crazy, and it makes me feel like I'm a bit useless considering all the buttons and switches I have at my disposal on my keyboard and this mouse with its 3D printed shell. But these people can't even move their arms and are carving up the battlefield, blowing into straws. Okay, I'm way oversimplifying the quad stick, but if you ever watch that on Twitch someday, you'll see what I mean. For other people, the issues aren't with physical controls, but are with the colors, the text, the sound, the ways you need to communicate with other players, whether or not there's a motion blurring setting, or how cognitively difficult it is to puzzle solve, and if there's a way to enable the hints. There's so many ways, and I get it's a pretty daunting task to make accommodation for all of them. But you'd be a bit surprised these days if a business in the real world had a welcome sign out front and nice wheelchair access in the main door, only to have no elevator or ramps to the shop floor. The electronic worlds you create are no different, and it's just as important that they are accessible. When I think back to what my life was like as a kid, and how free from my disability I felt by being able to plug into 8-bit virtual worlds. I used to fly through them or jump around on my Amiga, and to be honest, I'm insanely jealous of the kids today at the same age who'll be potentially flying through literally virtual reality worlds of a bajillion color brilliance. But the sense of freedom they'll get is absolutely no different. The sense of belonging and of community that they will get is of being able to shed the hurt and the weight of their real-world disability, to be a part of an amazing MMO and communities that exist in so many games today. They'll be the same sense of belonging that I got from joining IRC chat rooms and playing Vampire the Masquerade or D&D, pre this modern D20 stuff, via text chat and dice bots. But they can only do that if the game designers believe in designing them so that everyone can play. If you amazing humans designing and producing games remember to build the digital versions of the wheelchair ramps and accessible bathrooms that disabled people need to occupy spaces in the real world, so they can be part of your amazing virtual worlds. Sadly, unlike building a new school or a restaurant, there is no government-mandated rulebook or guideline, really, for how many ramps or if you need to put Braille on something, or exactly how wide the doors need to be for a wheelchair to get through. That's not to entirely say there are no laws about it. If you want to release a video game in the USA, I believe it now needs to comply with something called the CVAA, part of which is a set of rules around accessible communications on games released to the North American market. They legally need to be required to handle communication between players in an accessible way, and on a really simple level, this means if you don't want to get in trouble, all new games in the US must provide functions for text-to-speech. I don't know why I still count like this. It doesn't make sense. For text-to-speech, subtitles for speech, UI elements need to be able to be accessed by screen readers and all that kind of stuff. Everyone must be able to communicate via and understand your platform regardless of their disability. To be fair, if you think you might need to know more about this, do feel free to get in touch. We can talk about the details, but there really is no one solid set of guidelines for you to follow that means your game will get a gold star in being accessible. There are also no gold stars in being accessible, but the best way to make it accessible is to do the research and do it early. Honestly, start with accessible design in mind and talk to the experts. At a really low level, that means people like myself that can come on board and consult on what it means to have accessibility in your game and what we need as users with disabilities. Then on a more technical level, for more widespread access to people that can help test the game for accessibility, get in touch with an organization like Able Gamers. They're a charity for disabled gamers that help design the XAC with Microsoft. They have real live disabled guinea pigs. I mean, gamers to test it on. They're an amazing organization. They actually raise a lot of money for donating and distributing accessible controllers around the world to all kinds of disabled gamers. I think they even sometimes donate to like hospitals that have children's wards and things that need accessible controllers. I've done a few things with them. I've been a follower of theirs since they started. And then in other things, the best way to look at designing great accessibility options menu is to also stop thinking of it as designing a great accessibility options menu. It's honestly all just options. Some people want to play your game in ultra 4K glory. Others are okay with them getting more FPS at 1080. To some, options include bigger text size. Others want the subtitles turned on, while colorblind options are also a really basic thing. Basically, it's all just options. So you don't need to point out which ones are accessibility options that you added specifically for people with disabilities. Chances are some of the things that you didn't add specifically for the disabled are the ones we're adjusting to make it more accessible too. Just know that, honestly, the more options you can include in your game, the more chance your game is going to get picked up by someone who will love the world that you've created almost as much as you do. You never know when what you've made might actually turn out to be the game that helps someone like me escape from our real world of pain and disability into a virtual world where we're the fastest, strongest, or just the sneakiest players in the game. I personally love the fact that a day at the office for me involves going into the studio and playing video games against a world full of people with presumably the standard number of fingers. And sure, I don't win every game, but to me it's not about winning. Keep hitting that. To me, it's not about winning, it's just being able to get that one kill in a game of Apex or PUBG. Honestly, it means for just a moment, I could participate. For just a moment, I was better and stronger than the person with proper skin and a fistful of fingers. Heck, sometimes I do win as well, but then my only wish is that everyone else in the game had the opportunity to realize they were served by a guy who really doesn't have hands. Sadly, it's a fact often lost on most people. April, where are you? Oh, he's hiding somewhere. Ah, there he is. Folks, to be fair, I think my talk is about over. This slide... Yeah, the slides aren't related to what I'm actually saying, but there's a few slides coming up with links to more information to get you started on making accessible games. And then because, it probably won't be long enough for you to write all that down, the last slide is my contact details so you can get in touch. Hopefully, I've given you something to think about when you're, thinking about your work in gaming and communities. And in making the world basically a more accessible place to everyone. I also hope that this gives you another frame to use when thinking about some of the talks you've heard today, and will hear tomorrow, by the way. Being an ally to the disabled gaming community is really just about making sure as many people as possible can play your game. And trust me, when you're 85 and you've got arthritis in your thumbs, but you still love video games, you'll thank the game designers and the clever people that thought of adding accessible controller options to your VR cyborg neck plug game experiences. I know I will. Go on. Nope, too far. I said it was quick, but not that quick. There you go. So, game accessibility guidelines, and then the accessible player experience by able gamers. And the International Game Dev Association have a special interest group as well. Now I'll go to the last one. There we go. No. This controller doesn't like me. It's not accessible. There we go. That is me. Feel free to get in touch. I'd love to talk to you about how to make your games more accessible. Thanks, guys. questions. Now, I know I'm it, but if anyone wants to ask me questions, I'll be around. Otherwise, I'll be here tomorrow and at the events as well, so feel free to come and chat. There's a sticker on my badge that says I like to talk to everybody.
He also was Hanley, the person who got us our the controller pins.
Yeah.
He might have gotten some prizes from different tasks, but if you do want one, it's an aspect too.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.